what you're going to do with the Beatitudes. And let me say this about the Beatitudes too. Jesus seems to be well, we're going to talk about this, but Jesus seems to be calling on something about the creation. He seems to be referring to the creation and to the first psalm. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel. The first psalm starts off with the word blessed. Blessed is the man. And he seems to be calling out to this. And this is Jesus's, in the book of Matthew, this is his inaugural speech. This is his inaugural sermon. So far in the book of Matthew, we have the genealogy, we have the story of his birth, we have the baptism, then he goes into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil for 40 days and 40 nights. So he's in the wilderness in chapter 4, and here we are at chapter 5. So Jesus has said a few things in the book of Matthew up to this point, but he hasn't laid out any teachings. So here he shows up, bam, right out of the wilderness. Here we go. Here's what I have to say. This is like the kickoff, the kickoff meeting for the project. This is the inaugural sermon, the inaugural speech. This is the first thing that he has to say. So if you were opening up your New Testament and you kind of wanted to see what it was about, you start, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. You would start in Matthew, and this is the first major or lengthy monologue that you would come across. This is it. So it's very interesting to look at it from that perspective. As you're interpreting the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, which should not be confused with the Sermon on the Plain from elsewhere, Luke. Here's what I want to encourage you to do, and to try this, okay? Break up the Sermon on the Mount into paragraphs. One of my first inklings was that kind of like how the Old Testament laws can be summarized by one of the 10 commandments. Well, this falls under thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. But if somebody does break in and they're stealing in the middle of the night and you smite them that they die, thou hast not sinned, no sacrifice shall be made for him. I've got categorizes under both of those. Thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not kill. So I thought that maybe each one of these paragraphs would fall under one of these each. Oh, this falls under that, blessed are they that mourn. But when I look at it very closely and carefully, what I found out is that they incorporate many of them. So what I want you to do is go through the Sermon on the Mount and break it into paragraphs. And this is a sample. You can break it into these paragraphs or you can do something else. And so you would take each paragraph and then go back through the Beatitudes and see how they are being applied in that paragraph, okay? So if I follow Jesus' instructions here, how is that being merciful? How is it being pure? How is it being a peacemaker? How is it hungering and thirsting after righteousness? Where's the meekness here? Where's the mourning? Where's the being poor in spirit? And you go through each one of these paragraphs one by one, systematically, and then take it back. And this could be a good meditation to do, okay? I recommend not approaching Scripture with the intent to try to get a systematic meaning and doctrines out of it that you can preach and defend and stand on. That's not the point, okay? What I want you to do is to use these as more meditatively. Think about each one of these and then go back to the Beatitudes at the beginning of chapter 5 and compare that paragraph back to all the Beatitudes and meditate on each one. And maybe take blessed are the poor in spirit. Now read that whole paragraph with just that one in mind. And then blessed are they that mourn. Reread that paragraph with just that one in mind. Okay, especially after we talk about what all of these mean and how they apply. I think after we do this, we're going to try to see if we can knock out one or two today. I think this would be a very powerful meditation for you to go back into the Sermon on the Mount. You can use the you can meditate on Scripture by taking each one of these paragraphs and meditating through the paragraph with a beatitude on the mind, okay? So meditating is all through Scripture. A lot of meditation, the context of meditation in the Bible is meditating on Scripture, and I think this is going to be a very transformative practice for you to do in your personal life, is to take each one of these paragraphs and then meditatively run it through carefully, all of the Beatitudes through the entire paragraph. I think you will get a huge transformative blessing out of that. And if you, let's see, how many paragraphs do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? And you might put that into, you might combine these two. Okay? You could say that verse 48 is wrapping up all the content in chapter 5, or you could couple it with verses 43 through 47. Either way, you can do it either way you want. That's fine. 11 days, 12 days. So this here you have an 11-day meditation. And that's not, I don't even have chapter 6 on here. I don't even have chapter 7 on here, okay? So I'm pretty sure you could get a month's worth of meditation, scriptural meditation, right out of the Sermon on the Mount by taking each of the paragraphs and taking it back through and meditatively comparing it to each of the Beatitudes. So that's what I want to encourage you to do. I want you to do that, especially after we talk about what some of these things mean. And now we're not talking about what they mean like this. We're not trying to develop a bunch of doctrinal conclusions and this is the only thing that it can ever mean. We're just going to try to clear the mud off our eyes a little bit and see these in a growth and transformation perspective with all the stuff that we've talked about in 2023. Interestingly, Jesus gives us 8 Beatitudes, and Buddhism has the Eightfold Path. Now, when I say Buddhism, some of you guys get scared. Oh, it's a different religion. I'm not advocating anything about Buddhism, but I would say this. Buddhism is, we talk about it like it's another religion, but Buddhism is actually agnostic when it comes to metaphysics and God. It doesn't make any claims about God. Buddhism is about the person. It's about the person becoming a person who suffers less. That's really all it's about. It's a set of practices. I think that if Buddhism were invented today, we would not think of it as a religion. We would think of it as cognitive behavioral therapy. I think we would think of it as something that's completely secular and that's not a religion. But because of how and when it originated, you might think of it something like you think of like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. We typically don't think of their stuff as religious stuff. Okay, we think of it as like philosophy, something like that. And I think that if Buddhism were to be invented today, it would, or in a different place, it would come out as a philosophy more so than a religion. It's not so much a religion. But if you look at what the Eightfold Path is, none of these things are objectionable. I mean, what's wrong with having the correct, the right intentions? What's wrong with doing the right thing, right actions? What's wrong with having the right amount or type of effort? What's wrong with having the right kind of concentration? The right speech. I mean, the Bible, put your mind on certain things, the right mindfulness. I mean, the Bible advocates all of these things. Okay, so these aren't the devil. But interestingly, there's 8, and interestingly, Jesus also has 8 things. So is it just a coincidence? I don't know. There are some people who think that Jesus was influenced by the East, and I don't know, who got that harebrained idea. And I'm kind of being facetious because we have the wise men came from the East. I have this suspicion that the constituency of Melchizedek possibly is represented in the East somehow, somewhere. That's just something I think about. I'm not trying to put that as a doctrine for you or anything like that. How do these wise men know anything? You ever think about that? Did they get it from Daniel? Daniel and Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Did they get it from those guys? Or is it from, what is the lingering remnant of whatever Melchizedek was doing in the East? I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though. But some of these guys came from the East. Some people think that Jesus went to the East. I think that, and if you go to India, there's places that tell you Jesus came to India and followed and went in their wisdom schools. And there's some stories that he went there and did that and got kicked out and then came back. I'm not saying any of that's necessarily true. I'm just saying that the stories are out there.